think about the sheer terror of relying entirely on a stranger just to get out of bed.
Oh, absolutely. It's incredibly vulnerable.
Right, or even just going to the grocery store. I mean, if you've ever been a caregiver for a sick parent, or if you rely on assistance yourself, you know that we usually treat these care networks as, like, highly clinical.
Very serious.
Very
For us,
clinical.
exactly. Deadly serious. But what if the secret to a resilient support system isn't, medical rigidity? What if the secret is a gig buddy or a cat named Haley Goggins and a care worker known as a friendly dragon?
I mean, it completely upends how modern society structures the concept of help, and that's exactly what we're doing in our deep dive today.
Yeah, we have a really fascinating mission for this deep dive. We are unpacking a single, amazingly dense piece of source material. It's a poem, or actually more of a lyric song by Phil Moreland.
Right, it's titled Doors Open, a song of connection and support.
And when you first look at Phil's writing, it looks incredibly brief. It's basically a single, flowing, unpunctuated stanza. You could read the whole thing out loud in under a minute.
Totally. But the way I think about this poem is it's like a piece of sea glass.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, like it's small, it's been shaped by the daily rhythm of life, but when you actually hold it up to the light, there is just an incredible amount of color and detail in there.
That's a perfect analogy.
Okay.
Because he isn't just writing nice, heartwarming platitudes. He's laying out a highly practical, profound micro-manifesto on community care.
Which is why we really need to unpack it line by line for you. So let's jump right into the literal physical action that anchors the whole piece.
Let's do it.
The very first line is, he writes, I'm very passionate about doors being opened by myself for elderly people who need a hand opening them.
Right.
Now, I'm kind of stuck on his use of the phrase very passionate here. I mean, we usually reserve the word passion for like grand, sweeping life pursuits, right?
Massive political causes or grand romances.
Exactly. So why use such intense, elevated language for the completely mundane act of holding open a physical door?
Well, because he's identifying the exact mechanism of how community is built. By using the word passionate, Phil refuses to let holding a door just be an afterthought.
Or like a polite reflex.
Exactly. He elevates this everyday task into a core personal value. And there's a deeply practical element here when we think about how we support elderly neighbors.
Because society's infrastructure is kind of hostile to them.
Oh, almost exclusively built for the able-bodied and the hurried. Heavy glass doors, stiff hinges, revolving doors that they move way too fast.
It's an everyday equalizer. Everyone encounters those doors, but not everyone can easily pass through them.
Right. They aren't just annoyances if you're elderly or have mobility issues. They are literal physical barricades preventing you from participating in public life.
So it completely dictates their access to the world. Like if you can't open the door to the pharmacy, you don't get your medicine.
And if you can't open the cafe door, you're isolated from social interaction. And that's why Phil is asserting his agency here.
By saying doors being opened by myself.
Precisely. He's taking personal responsibility for dismantling that infrastructure of isolation. He isn't waiting around for the city council to install an automatic button.
He's just doing it. But that makes me wonder about the psychological impact on the person doing the holding.
How do you mean?
Well, if you're actively looking for doors to open for people, like if you're choosing to take that physical action daily, does that physical act serve as the gateway for broader community empathy? Like, does holding a door actually rewire your brain?
The short answer is yes, absolutely.
Really?
Yeah. We have this societal misconception that empathy is just this abstract internal feeling, like a mood that occasionally strikes us when we watch a sad movie or something.
Yeah, right.
But neurologically and psychologically, empathy is an action. When you step up to a door and adjust your physical stride to match the slower pace of an elderly person, you're forcing your brain out of its default mode.
It's sort of self-centered survival mode.
Exactly. You are physically decelerating.
You're holding physical space for someone else's vulnerability.
And you're usually making eye contact, too. That physical deceleration triggers a cognitive shift. Your brain stops calculating your own hurried goals, getting coffee, catching the train, and briefly wires itself into the reality of another human being.
Wow. So if you do that repeatedly and do it with passion, like Phil insists, you build empathy as a muscle memory.
The physical act builds the psychological habit. You start viewing your neighborhood not as a passive backdrop to your busy life, but as an interconnected web.
Where you have an active role in helping others navigate the space. I love that. But, holding a door for a stranger is just a momentary interaction. It's like, 5 seconds.
True.
What happens when that support isn't a brief encounter, but a permanent daily necessity in your private life? Because Phil's poem makes a hard pivot here.
Right, we move inward.
Yeah, from the public street into his inner circle, he transitions to discussing what he calls the good support relationships around me.
And this is where his framework for care gets truly revolutionary, I think.
Because he lists the specific entities that provide that support, and the language is completely devoid of clinical jargon.
It really is.
I just want to read the cast of characters he introduces because the contrast is wild. He says he's very passionate about his cat, Haley Goggins.
A great name.
Incredible name. And he talks about how his big buddy brings happiness to him. And then he lists these specific names: Chrysalis, Captain Smiley, Debbie Duck, and Haley B. the Friendly Dragon.
Just think about the normal environment of institutional care, right? The vocabulary society uses is heavily medicalized.
Yeah, we talk about support workers, care plans, risk assessments.
Client outcomes. It's bureaucratic. It's sterile. But Phil takes the people who provide his care and completely strips away that bureaucratic distance.
He paints them in these vibrant neon colors. But okay, let me play devil's advocate for a second here.
Go for it.
Because this brings up a tension I think a lot of people might feel. If my physical well-being depends entirely on a care network, I don't know if I necessarily want, like, a Debbie Duck or a Friendly Dragon.
You'd want a serious professional.
Exactly. The stakes are high. Doesn't injecting all this playfulness kind of risk undermining the serious nature of caregiving?
It's a totally valid fear, but the psychology of caregiving actually suggests the exact opposite. Clinical rigidity is often incredibly brittle.
Brittle? How so?
If you structure a support system purely as a transactional medical service, where I'm the trained professional and you're the patient, burnout happens exponentially faster on both sides. The caregiver suffers compassion fatigue, and the person receiving care feels like a burden, like a task to be managed rather than a human being.
So the professionalism actually creates this emotional distance that causes the system to crack.
It does. Think of it like constructing a brick building in an earthquake zone, right?
Okay.
If you use rigid, inflexible mortar to hold the bricks together, the first time the earth shakes, the wall shatters. The rigidity is its downfall.
But if you use flexible mortar, the building can sway with the tremors.
Exactly. It remains standing. In a support system, playfulness, nicknames, and deep affection. That is the flexible mortar.
Wow. That drastically shifts how we should view those nicknames. Calling someone Chris Captain Smiley isn't a lack of seriousness. It's basically a survival mechanism.
It equalizes a profound power imbalance. In any care relationship, the person giving care holds massive power over the person receiving it.
Right, of course.
When Phil assigns these imaginative, playful names, he's reclaiming his agency. You can only be playful when you feel safe.
It signals immense trust.
Exactly. So when a crisis inevitably hits, when the medical stakes do get high, Phil isn't relying on a cold protocol. He's relying on a deeply human bond. And that is infinitely more resilient.
That makes the inclusion of his gig buddy and his cat make perfect sense alongside the human care workers.
Absolutely.
And for anyone listening who might not know, a gig buddy is this brilliant program where volunteers are paired with people who have learning disabilities or autism, specifically to go out to concerts, theater shows, nightlife.
Which addresses a massive gap in how we view support. We usually align care just as keeping someone safe, fed, and sheltered. Survival.
Right. But a gig buddy focuses on thriving.
Yes. Phil specifically notes that his gig buddy brings happiness to me. True support has to include access to culture, joy, and shared fun.
And a pet like Haley Goggins the cat is part of that same spectrum of daily supportive friendship. They all inject joy into everyday life.
They're all vital components of the network.
Okay, so we've established this incredibly vibrant, flexibly mortared cast of characters. But this brings us to the hardest part of the text. And frankly, the hardest part of relying on anyone else.
What happens when they leave?
Exactly. Staff turnover. It is the ultimate crisis in the care sector and a huge source of anxiety for anyone who depends on a community.
It's terrifying.
And the poem shifts from describing the people to describing the flow of time. The motif of the door returns, but it transforms. It's no longer the literal door he's holding.
Right, it becomes metaphorical.
A revolving door of care, Phil writes. Doors open and close for new support to come and goes bye-bye support. Go out the door with passion. See you later, alligator. See you again another day, best team from Shaftesbury.
The phrasing there is just incredibly rhythmic. It almost reads like a nursery rhyme mixed with a fond farewell speech.
Yeah.
If you interpret these lyrics as a rhythmic song about community care, you really start to see a profound emotional coping mechanism at work.
Because losing someone you trust, someone who knows your daily routines intimately, someone you've named the friendly dragon, that's usually traumatic.
Of course, the instinct is to cling to them, to feel immense anxiety when they announce they're moving on.
But that fear is rooted in a mindset of scarcity, isn't it?
Exactly. We think this specific person is the only one who understands me, and if they leave, the care vanishes.
But Phil completely flips that script. He refuses to view the departure of a support person as this tragic, system-ending loss.
He embraces the turnover, and he uses that powerful word again, with passion. He says, bye-bye support, go out the door with passion.
It actually makes me think of watching a beautifully directed stage play.
Oh, how so?
Well, when a talented actor finishes their scene and exits the stage, you don't panic. You don't feel the sense of dread that the play is over. You just understand that their exit is the natural rhythm of the performance.
Right, they exit so the next scene can begin, so the next actor can enter.
Exactly. Phil is basically directing his own life's play.
And he softens that transition by using deeply familiar, disarming language. See you later, alligator.
A phrase we learn in childhood.
Right. It implies an absolute certainty of continuation. It removes the sting of a permanent goodbye and signals a graceful, rhythmic acceptance that support is an ongoing cycle. Doors close, but they open again.
But to have that kind of graceful acceptance, you have to have an underlying faith that the system itself won't collapse.
You have to know the door will actually open again.
Which is why that final line of the poem is so crucial. Best team from Shaftesbury.
Yes. For context, Shaftesbury is a major charity organization in the UK that provides extensive care and support services for people living with disabilities.
They are the infrastructure behind Phil's care.
Precisely.
So if this entire poem is a rhythmic song about care, the individual workers, the friendly dragons, and the Captain Smileys, they're the melody. They weave in and out, they change keys, they take solos.
Love that.
But the team from Shaftesbury, the broader community organization, they're the bass line. They are the constant, steady rhythm section that ensures the song doesn't stop just because a melody changes.
That is the ultimate shift from a scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset. Phil trusts the rhythm section. He knows that the care itself doesn't vanish just because the human delivering it changes.
It's a radical reimagining of how we process loss in our networks.
It really is. When we expect a support system to remain perfectly static, we're just setting ourselves up for heartbreak. Human life is fundamentally dynamic. People move, circumstances change.
Volunteers age out.
Exactly. But if we view support as a rhythmic cycle, we cultivate incredible emotional resilience. We can deeply appreciate and love the people in our lives while they're in the room without being destroyed when it's time for them to exit the stage.
Looking at all of this together, Phil Moreland hasn't just written a nice poem. He's given us a blueprint for how to interact with the people around us.
Regardless of whether we're currently giving care, receiving care, or just moving through the world.
It's a comprehensive philosophy.
If we synthesize the mechanics of what we've discussed today, it really comes down to 3 practical steps.
Okay, let's hear them.
First, it starts with the physical world. Empathy is an action, not a mood. The cognitive shift required to build community begins the moment you slow your physical pace to hold a literal door for an elderly neighbor.
You're building the muscle memory of looking outward.
Right. Second, it's about how we define the quality of that support. It's the active rejection of sterile transactional relationships.
Understanding that playfulness, like assigning joyful nicknames or sharing a laugh with a gig buddy or petting your cat.
That is the flexible mortar that makes human bonds resilient enough to survive a crisis. It equalizes power and injects humanity into the clinical.
And third?
Third is the psychological mastery of flow. It's the rhythmic acceptance of change. Trusting the bass line of your community enough to say goodbye to individuals with passion, knowing the revolving door of care will continue to turn.
So if you're listening to this right now, this isn't just about professional caregiving. If you manage a team at work or organize a neighborhood group, or you're just relying on friends to get through a hard year, these mechanics apply directly to you.
Absolutely, they do.
Think about the physical doors you'll encounter today. Before you push through one in a rush, just look around. Make the deliberate physical choice to slow down and remove that barrier for someone else.
And when you inevitably experience a shift in your own social circles, when a trusted colleague takes a new job or a friend moves across the country, notice your default reaction.
Notice the panic or that feeling of scarcity.
Right. And see if you can borrow a bit of Phil's philosophy. Approach that transition not as a structural collapse of your life, but as the natural ongoing rhythm of an interconnected community.
To wrap up our deep dive into this incredible piece of writing, we want to leave you with a final, provocative thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day.
We talked heavily about the psychological power of those neon-colored, joyful nicknames, right? How they strip away the bureaucratic distance.
And build a truly resilient bond. So look at your own life. Look at the people who keep you afloat every day, whether that's your partner, your barista, your accountant, or your best friend.
Whoever it is.
If you had to assign joyful, imaginative nicknames to your own daily support network, your personal equivalent to Chris Captain Smiley or the Friendly Dragon, who would they be?
That's a great question.
And how might viewing those people through that deliberately playful, affectionately colored lens change the way you value their presence in your life tomorrow?